The emergency beacon had failed 3 cycles ago. The supply drop never came, and now Ravik dragged himself through the entrance of the observation outpost, with blood seeping through the torn plating of his combat armor. The Vakthros Alpha had survived encounters with Krelthar war parties, navigated asteroid fields blind, and once held a defensive position alone for 6 rotations. But the ambush in the northern canyons had been different. Calculated. Brutal. His pack scattered, communications jammed, and a plasma round had torn through his shoulder before he'd managed to eliminate the hostiles. He expected silence when he entered. Perhaps the cold sterility of an abandoned post. His cubs, barely past their first molt, had been left in the care of the human. Tella, the soft-skinned, fragile creature that Command had assigned to the outpost as a xenobiologist. Ravik had protested. Humans were weak. Their bodies broke easily. They had no claws, no natural armor, no enhanced senses. They were prey species, pretending to be explorers, but Command had insisted, and Ravik had no choice when the emergency recall came and his cubs had nowhere else to go. What he found when he stumbled into the main habitat module made him freeze. Tella sat on the floor, her back against the supply lockers, with both of his cubs curled against her sides. Kivan, his daughter, had her small, clawed hand wrapped around Tella's arm. Drevik, his son, was asleep with his head resting on her lap. The human looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes. Her hair disheveled. Her uniform hanging loose on her frame. But what struck Ravik wasn't her appearance. It was what lay in front of her. Ration bars. Protein packs. Nutrient supplements. All Vakthros grade, all opened. All clearly consumed by his cubs. The wrappers lay scattered around them like evidence of survival. And beside Tella sat her own rations. Unopened. Ravik. Kivan's eyes snapped open, and she scrambled to her feet, her young voice carrying the sharp pitch of relief and fear. Father! You're hurt! Drevik woke immediately, his training already evident even at his age. He assessed his father's wounds with the tactical eye of a future warrior. Tella moved slower. She rose carefully, as though her body was struggling with the effort. When she stood, Ravik could see how thin she'd become. Humans were already smaller than Vakthros, but now she looked diminished. You're bleeding, Tella said, her voice steady despite her condition. Sit down. I'll get the medical kit. Why? Ravik growled, though his voice lacked its usual authority. Pain and shock were catching up to him. Why didn't you eat? Tella paused, her hand on the medical locker. She glanced at the cubs, then back at him. Your supply beacon failed. The drop never came. I had enough rations for myself, or enough to supplement theirs. She pulled out the medical kit with hands that trembled slightly. The choice was obvious. Obvious? Ravik's voice rose, though he swayed on his feet. You're starving yourself. For cubs, Tella interrupted, moving toward him with the kit. Sit. Down. There was something in her voice. Not aggression, not the dominance posturing his kind used, but an absolute, immovable certainty that brooked no argument. Ravik found himself sinking onto the bench. As Tella began treating his wounds with surprising competence, Ravik watched his cubs hover nearby. They looked healthy, alert, well-fed. Kivan's scales gleamed properly. Drevik's eyes were bright and focused. They're growing, he said quietly. They're supposed to. Tella replied, cleaning the plasma burn on his shoulder. He hissed at the pain. But she didn't flinch. Cubs need proper nutrition during their development phase. I read the physiological reports. Their bodies are building the foundation for their adult strength. Their bone density. Their neural connections. She applied a regenerative gel. With practiced efficiency. Missing meals now could affect them for life. And you? Ravik challenged. What about your foundation? Your health? Tella smiled, and it was perhaps the saddest expression Ravik had ever seen on any species. I'm already grown. I can handle it. They can't. Father, Kivon said softly, pressing against his uninjured side. Tella taught us human songs, and she told us stories about Earth. About humans who protected their young, even when they had nothing. She said humans have a saying, Drevik added, his young voice trying to sound grown. Not on my watch. She said it means that while she's here, nothing bad will happen to us. No matter what. Ravik stared at the human. She avoided his gaze, focusing intently on bandaging his wounds. Her hands shook now, not from fear, but from weakness, from hunger. In that moment, Ravik understood something that would change his perception forever. Humans weren't weak because they lacked claws or armor. They weren't prey because they were small and soft. They were the most dangerous species in the galaxy because they had something his warrior culture had forgotten in its pursuit of strength. They had the capacity to sacrifice everything, even their own survival, for those they'd chosen to protect. Not because of duty, not because of orders, but because of something deeper. Something they called compassion. The supply ship arrives tomorrow, Ravik said quietly. Command confirmed it before I lost communications. Tella nodded, finally meeting his eyes. Good. Then we all made it. You could have died, but I didn't. Tella finished the bandaging and stepped back. And neither did they. That's what matters. Ravik reached out with his good arm and grasped her shoulder gently, mindful of his claws against her fragile skin. You have my life debt, human. By the old codes, by the warrior's oath, you have earned the protection of my bloodline. Forever. Tella's eyes widened. Ravik, I was just doing what anyone— No, he interrupted. Not anyone. You. He looked at his cubs, then back at her. When the others ask why I trust humans in my pack, why I vouch for your kind before the council, I will tell them this story. I will tell them about the human who fed my cubs from her own rations. Tom. Kivon and Drevik moved to Tella's sides again, pressing against her as they had when Ravik first entered. She wrapped her arms around them both. And despite her weakened state, despite everything she'd endured, she smiled. Well, she said softly, someone had to teach these two that strength isn't just about claws and armor. Sometimes it's about knowing what's worth protecting. In the distance, the hum of an approaching ship grew louder. Help was coming. Food was coming. Relief was coming. But Ravik knew that something else had arrived in that outpost during the dark cycles of isolation and scarcity. A bond that transcended species. A loyalty that wasn't commanded but earned. And a truth that would echo through the stars. Never underestimate a human who has something to protect.